It happened in less than 10 seconds. A steaming cup of hot coffee, a crowded cafe on a chilly morning, and one cruel decision. The officer smirked, leaned forward, and without hesitation, tipped a scalding drink onto the lap of a black woman who had done nothing, absolutely nothing, wrong. Her scream echoed through the cafe. Chairs scraped, jaws dropped, silence followed. But what that officer didn't know was that the woman he had just humiliated had a son, and her son wasn't just anybody. By the time this story ends, that officer will wish he had never picked up that cup. Stay with me till the end, because you will not believe the twist. And if you love stories where justice flips the script on cruelty, make sure you subscribe, because what you're about to hear will shock you to your core. Her name was Angela Price, 48 years old, a mother, a woman who lived her life with quiet dignity. Angela wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. She wasn't someone the world noticed often. But ask anyone in her neighborhood, and they'd tell you, Angela was the kind of woman who made people feel safe. She worked as a nurse's aide in a retirement home. Long hours, little pay, but a heart so big the residents would light up whenever she walked in. She had that way of calling everyone baby. That smile that made you feel like the world hadn't forgotten you. And if life had been unfair to her, and oh, it had, Angela carried it with grace. Because, to her, bitterness was poison, and kindness was the cure. It was a Saturday morning when Angela decided to stop at Maplewood Café, a small but busy spot downtown. She wore her work scrubs, fresh from a night shift, her hair tied neatly in braids, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but her spirit still warm. She ordered a simple black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just something to wake her body enough for the bus ride home. Angela paid, thanked the barista with a tired smile, and found a seat by the window. That's when he walked in. Officer Darren Cole, a man who wore his badge not as a symbol of duty, but as a crown of power. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform ironed sharp enough to cut, and a sneer, a permanent sneer, that told the world he believed he was untouchable. Darren wasn't there for coffee. Not really. He was there to be seen. And when his eyes scanned the room, they landed on Angela, a black woman, alone, in his cafe. That was enough. He approached her table slowly, the kind of slow that makes the victim feel the walls closing in. Angela, always polite, looked up and smiled. "Good morning, officer." He didn't smile back. Instead, he said, "You in my seat." Angela blinked, looked around. There were plenty of empty chairs. She said softly, "I didn't realize this was taken, sir, but you're welcome to sit." That's when it happened. The moment that would change everything. He grabbed the coffee cup from her hands, lifted it high, and with deliberate cruelty, poured it onto her lap. Angela gasped as the hot liquid soaked her scrubs. Her chair screeched against the floor as she jumped, trembling, trying not to cry out. The cafe froze. A hush fell over the crowd, and Officer Darren Cole smirked. "Now it's mine," he muttered, tossing the empty cup on the floor. A young barista covered her mouth in horror. An older man by the counter muttered, "Jesus Christ." But no one moved, because he was a cop, and everyone knew what happened when you challenged a cop in that town. Angela stood trembling, her lap burning, her dignity in pieces. But even then, she didn't curse, didn't scream. She simply said, "May God forgive you." And with that, she turned, gathered her bag, and walked out. But she wasn't walking into silence. She was walking into a storm. You see, Darren Cole wasn't just a bad cop. He was a predator of power. This wasn't his first time targeting black citizens. Complaints had been filed, stories whispered, but somehow the files disappeared. The voices were ignored. Why? Because Darren's father was a retired police captain. And in that city, That made Darren untouchable. Or so he thought. That night, Angela went home quietly. She didn't tell her neighbors. She didn't even call her sister. But she did call one person. Her son, a man who had left the city years ago. A man whose name Darren Cole would soon wish he had never heard. And when Angela's trembling voice reached her son's ears, silence fell on the other end of the line. Not the silence of weakness, the silence of calculation. Her son said only one thing. "Mom, don't worry. I'll take care of this." The next morning, Officer Darren Cole strutted into the precinct, laughing with his buddies, bragging about the coffee incident. What he didn't know was that his life, his badge, and his entire illusion of power was already slipping away. Because Angela's son had just boarded a plane back home, and he wasn't coming quietly. Cliffhanger leaves viewers wondering, who is the son? What will he do? What Officer Darren Cole didn't realize was this. Sometimes the quiet ones are connected to storms. Angela Price walked out of that cafe humiliated. Yes, but she walked out holding something more powerful than anger. A son. And that son wasn't just anybody. That night, Angela sat at her small dining table, the faint buzz of the refrigerator filling the silence. Her scrubs were still damp. Her thighs still stung from a burn. She pressed a cool rag against her skin, tears silently falling. But the real pain wasn't the burn. It was the way he smirked, the way the cafe had fallen silent, the way no one had moved to help her. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. She scrolled through her contacts, past neighbors, past coworkers, past friends. Then she landed on one name. Her son. She dialed. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. Mom. The voice was deep, steady, with the kind of authority that came from years of discipline. Angela tried to hold it together, but her voice cracked. "Baby, I didn't want to call you, but something happened." And then, through tears, she told him everything. The officer, the cafe, the coffee, the humiliation. There was silence on the other end. Not the silence of confusion, not the silence of shock, the silence of calculation. Then came his words. "Mom, don't worry. I'll take care of this." Angela tried to protest, but he hung up before she could finish. Her son was already making moves. His name was Marcus Price, 32 years old, tall, athletic, sharp eyes that had seen too much. Marcus wasn't just a man with a good job. He wasn't just doing well. Marcus was a decorated federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice. He had built his career tearing down corrupt officials, crooked cops, and criminal organizations. He was known for walking into courtrooms with evidence so airtight that even the slickest defense attorneys couldn't breathe. And Marcus wasn't just good at his job. He was relentless. The kind of man who didn't believe in letting things go, especially when it came to his mother. While Angela's son was boarding a plane, Officer Darren Cole was bragging at the precinct. He leaned against his locker, laughing with two fellow officers. "You should have seen her face," he sneered. She looked like a scared little rat. Didn't even fight back. Just squeaked and ran. The other officers chuckled uneasily, but not all of them. One rookie, Officer Jenkins, frowned. "That's not right, Darren. You can't just pour hot coffee on someone." Darren turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Watch yourself, rookie. You're new here. You want to last? You keep your mouth shut." Jenkins swallowed hard and nodded. The message was clear. In this precinct, Darren Cole's word was law, at least for now. On the plane ride home, Marcus stared out the window, the city lights twinkling below like tiny sparks. His mother had always been his strength. When he was a boy and kids teased him for not having the newest shoes, she would smile and say, "Baby, shoes don't make the man. Kindness does. When his father died young, it was Angela who worked double shifts, never complaining, always putting Marcus first. Everything he had, his education, his career, his drive, was built on her sacrifices. And now some small-town bully with a badge had dared humiliate her? Marcus clenched his fists. No, not this time. This wasn't just about a cup of coffee. This was about every woman like his mother who had been silenced. Every abuse swept under the rug. Every smile that hid pain. By the time this was over, Officer Darren Cole was going to learn a lesson he would never forget. Back at home, Angela sat awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She knew her son. She knew that tone in his voice, and it scared her. Angela had always taught Marcus to fight with wisdom, not fists, to use his mind, not his rage. But sometimes rage has a way of slipping in. She prayed softly, "Lord, guide him. Don't let this turn him into what that officer already is." 2 days later, Marcus walked into Maplewood Café. He wore a dark suit, no tie, his presence commanding the room without a word. The barista looked up nervously. She remembered the incident. "Excuse me," Marcus said calmly. "Were you working here last Saturday morning?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I was." Marcus leaned in. "Did you see what happened to my mother?" Her eyes widened. "You're her son?" "Yes." The barista hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I saw it. Everyone saw it. But," she lowered her voice, "no one wants to say anything. He's a cop. People are scared." Marcus gave a small nod. He expected this. But fear wasn't going to stop him. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "You won't have to stand alone." That same day, Rookie Officer Jenkins sat in his patrol car, staring at the steering wheel. He couldn't get Angela's face out of his head. The look of shock, the humiliation, the smirk on Darren's face. This wasn't why Jenkins had become a cop. He had wanted to protect people, to serve. And now he felt dirty. He pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the number of internal affairs. But before he could dial, a shadow fell over his car. It was Darren. "Everything okay, Rookie?" Darren asked, tapping the window. Jenkins forced a smile. "Why, yeah, just fine." But inside, his conscience was screaming. Later that week, Marcus strode into the police precinct. The room fell silent. Cops paused mid-conversation, sensing immediately that this man wasn't ordinary. Marcus walked straight to the front desk. "I need to speak with Officer Darren Cole," he said evenly. The desk sergeant frowned. "And you are—" Marcus pulled out his credentials. The gold seal of the Department of Justice glinted under the fluorescent lights. The sergeant's eyes widened. "Yes, sir. Right away." As Marcus waited, whispers spread like wildfire. "A DOJ prosecutor? Here? Why?" Then Darren appeared, swaggering, smirk still plastered on his face. "You looking for me?" Darren asked, arms crossed. Marcus turned slowly, his gaze sharp as glass. "Yes, I am." The two men stood face to face. Darren, arrogant and smirking. Marcus, calm but radiating danger. Marcus spoke first. "You pour hot coffee on my mother." Darren chuckled. "Oh, that? She was in my seat. She'll live." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low, controlled. "You made a mistake, officer. A mistake that's going to cost you." Darren's smirk faltered for just a second, but then he laughed. "You think I'm scared of you? Around here, I run things. My father built this precinct. Nobody touches me." Marcus leaned in, his voice a whisper only Darren could hear. "You're right about one thing. Nobody here will touch you. But I don't work here. I work in Washington. And when I'm done, you won't have a badge, a desk, or a future." Darren's eyes narrowed. You don't scare me. Marcus smiled coldly. Good. You should be terrified. That night, Darren sat alone in his car, tapping the steering wheel, anger boiling in his chest. How dare that man threaten him? How dare he think he could take him down? Darren reached for his phone. He dialed a number, a shadowy contact. When the line picked up, Darren muttered, "We've got a problem." And I need it handled. Little did he know, Marcus was already 3 steps ahead. And by the time this storm was over, Darren would realize he wasn't just fighting a son. He was fighting the entire system his badge had protected him from. Cliffhanger leaves viewers wondering, who did Darren call? What moves will Marcus make next? Officer Darren Cole thought he had power, thought his badge was a shield, thought his father's name made him untouchable. But then Marcus Price walked in, a federal prosecutor, the son of the woman Darren had humiliated. And with every quiet step, Marcus wasn't just fighting for his mother. He was tearing at the walls Darren had built around himself. But Darren wasn't going down without a fight. And the fight he was about to start would put lives on the line. That night, Darren sat his car outside a dive bar. Phone pressed his ear. A gravelly voice answered. "You better not be wasting my time, Cole." Darren hissed. "I got a DOJ suit sniffing around. Says he's gunning for me." The voice chuckled darkly. "You want this handled?" Darren clenched his jaw. "Yeah, quietly." The voice paused. "That'll cost you. Big." Darren looked around nervously. "Money's not a problem. Just make sure he never gets a chance to ruin me." The line went dead. Darren shoved his phone into his pocket, hands trembling slightly. For the first time, the swagger in his chest felt thin. The next morning, Marcus was already at work. He wasn't playing small-town games. He was building a federal case. At the café, he sat across from the young barista again. Her hands shook as she set down 2 coffees, one for him, one untouched for herself. "Mr. Price," she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "I don't want to get involved. If he finds out I spoke." Marcus leaned in gently. "Listen to me. I know you're scared. But if people like you stay silent, men like him keep winning. All I need is the truth." Tears welled in her eyes. "I saw everything." He grabbed her cup. He poured it on her. She screamed, and everyone just froze. Marcus nodded slowly. "That's enough. You'll be protected." She blinked. Protected? By who? Marcus pulled out his badge again, the gold seal glinting. By me and the Department of Justice. For the first time, the barista exhaled with relief. Meanwhile, Officer Jenkins was unraveling. Every night, he replayed the scene in his head. The smirk on Darren's face. The burn marks on Angela's scrubs. The silence in the cafe. He couldn't take it anymore. Finally, he picked up the phone and called a number he never thought he'd dial. Internal Affairs. "This is Officer Jenkins," he said, voice trembling. "I need to report misconduct. Serious misconduct." On the other end, the IA officer asked calmly, "Who are you reporting?" Jenkins swallowed hard. "Officer Darren Cole." And just like that, the first crack appeared in Darren's wall. That night, Angela was at home when she heard a noise outside. A car engine idling. Headlights cutting across her front yard. She pulled back the curtain just enough to see. A dark sedan. Windows tinted. Sitting there, watching. Her stomach twisted. She picked up the phone to call Marcus. But before she could dial, the car pulled away. Slowly, deliberately. Like a predator circling prey. Angela sank into a chair, whispering, "Lord, keep my son safe. Keep me safe." The next day, Marcus was summoned to the office of the police chief. Chief Reynolds was an older man with tired eyes, the kind of leader who had long ago chosen survival over justice. Mr. Price, the chief began, forcing a polite smile. I hear you're stirring up some noise about Officer Cole. Now, I understand you're upset, but maybe we can handle this quietly. Internal discipline, a write-up, suspension even. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Your officer assaulted my mother in public, and you're talking about a suspension? The chief sighed heavily. Look, Darren's father was a captain here. This department owes the family. Marcus leaned forward, voice like steel. You don't owe them anything. You owe the city justice. And if you think I'm going to let you sweep this under the rug, you've underestimated me. The chief's jaw tightened. This could get messy, Price. Messy for your mother. Messy for you. Marcus stood, slipping his badge back into his pocket. Messy is my specialty. Back at the precinct, Darren heard whispers. The rookie had been seen talking to IA. The café girl had been visited by the DOJ. The chief was under pressure. Panic gnawed at the edges of his arrogance. He stormed into the locker room, slamming his fist into a metal door. They think they can take me down? They don't know who I am. But the truth was gnawing at him. For the first time, Darren was realizing the walls were closing in. Marcus filed formal charges. Civil rights violation, assault, abuse of power. He gathered statements from witnesses. The barista, the old man at the counter, even Officer Jenkins. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And once Marcus had enough, he didn't just file it locally. He sent it straight to the federal courthouse. No chance of local cover-ups. No chance of quiet write-ups. This was going national. That night, Angela sat with Marcus at her kitchen table. Baby, she said softly, reaching across to take his hand. I don't want you to ruin your life over this. Don't let his evil drag you down. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Mom, this isn't just about you. This is about every person who's ever been treated like they don't matter. If I don't fight, he wins, and I can't let that happen. Angela's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, but in her heart, she feared the storm wasn't done. Late that night, Darren met the man from the phone call in a dark parking lot. The man was tall, lean, with eyes like ice. He slid a folder across the hood of Darren's car. Everything you need on Marcus Price. The man muttered. Where he lives. Who he knows. Weak points. Darren flipped through the folder, smirking again. Perfect. The man leaned closer. But understand this. If you go after him and fail, you're finished. Not just as a cop, as a man. Darren slammed the folder shut. I don't fail. But as the man walked away, Darren's hands trembled ever so slightly. The next day, Marcus received an anonymous envelope on his desk. Inside, photos. Photos of his mother's house, his car, even himself at the cafe. A note scribbled on the back. Drop it, or she pays. Marcus's jaw tightened. The fight had just turned personal. And if Darren thought threats would scare Marcus off, he was dead wrong. That night, Angela went to bed early, exhausted from the stress. Around midnight, a noise shattered the silence. Glass breaking, footsteps, a shadow moving through her living room. Angela sat up in bed, heart pounding, whispering, Marcus. But Marcus wasn't there. The intruder crept closer, and as Angela reached for her phone, a hand grabbed her wrist. She screamed. Cliffhanger. Who broke into Angela's house? What will Marcus do when he finds out? The glass shattered. A heavy hand clamped down on Angela's wrist, and her scream ripped through the night. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. This was retaliation. And in that terrifying moment, Angela Price, the woman who had lived her life with dignity and grace, found herself staring into the eyes of shadows sent to silence her forever. But what that intruder didn't know was that her son had already set a trap, and by the time this night ended, every lie, every abuse, every ounce of corruption that shielded Officer Darren Cole would come crumbling down. The intruder was masked, broad shoulders, gloved hands. His grip was iron, his voice low and menacing. "Stop fighting," he hissed. "You want to live, you'll shut up." Angela's heart pounded so loud she could hear in her ears. She struggled, tears filling her eyes, whispering, Why are you doing this?" The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. This wasn't a robbery. This was a warning. But before, he could drag her farther into the room. A blinding spotlight cut through the window. "Police! Drop her now!" Red and blue lights flooded the yard. The intruder froze, his grip loosening. Angela stumbled back, gasping for air, and then Marcus burst to the front door, his gun drawn, flanked by 2 federal marshals. "Step away from my mother," Marcus thundered. The intruder raised his hands slowly, glancing toward the window. But before he could run, marshals tackled him to the ground. Angela collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing. "Baby, you knew?" Marcus held her tightly. "I knew they'd come, Mom. I set the bait. You were never alone." The intruder's mask was ripped off, and Marcus's eyes hardened. It wasn't just some hired thug. It was a former cop, a man who had been forced out of the department years ago for brutality. And now, he was working for Darren Cole. The next morning, Darren swaggered into the precinct until he noticed the silence. Officers weren't laughing. They weren't talking. They were staring, because sitting in the chief's office, in handcuffs, was the intruder. And next to him, Marcus Price. Darren froze, his face draining of color. Marcus turned slowly, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Morning, Officer Cole. Recognize your friend here? He says you hired him." The room erupted. Officers murmured, eyes darting between Darren and Marcus. The chief's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "Cole," the chief barked, "my office. Now!" But it was too late. The walls Darren had built around himself were collapsing. Marcus wasted no time. He laid out the evidence, witness statements, internal affairs complaints, the barista's testimony, the rookie officer's courage, and now the intruder's confession. Piece by piece, Darren's untouchable shield cracked wide open. Turns out, Darren's record was dirtier than anyone knew. Traffic stops that mysteriously disappeared. Complaints that were buried. Even payouts from the city for civil suits that had been quietly settled. And every single one of those files was now on Marcus's desk. The trial of Officer Darren Cole drew crowds from across the city. On one side, Darren, his lawyers, and the fragile remnants of his arrogance. On the other, Marcus, his mother Angela seated proudly in the front row, and a stack of evidence so heavy it could crush a building. The prosecutor's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not just about one cup of coffee. This is about abuse of power. About a man who thought his badge gave him permission to harm the very citizens he swore to protect." Darren's lawyer fought back, painting Angela as dramatic, exaggerating. She wasn't burned. She wasn't hospitalized. This is being blown out of proportion. But Marcus stood, eyes blazing. Humiliation is not minor. Abuse of power is not small. And when you combine them, you don't just wound a person, you wound a community. The jury leaned forward. The room was electric. Then came the moment that sealed Darren's fate. Officer Jenkins, the rookie who had once been silenced, took the stand. His voice shook at first. But then, stronger, he said, "I saw Darren pour the coffee. I heard him laugh about it after. And this isn't the first time he's abused his badge. I joined the force to protect people, not to cover for monsters." Gasps filled the courtroom. Darren's face twisted in rage. "Liar! You're just a rookie," he shouted. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order. One more outburst, Officer Cole, and you'll be held in contempt." For the first time, Darren looked small. After days of testimony, the jury filed back in. The foreman stood, voice steady. "We find defendant, Officer Darren Cole, guilty on all counts." The room exploded in sound. Some cheered, some gasped. Angela closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. Marcus wrapped his arm around her shoulders, whispering, "It's over, Mom. It's finally over." But Darren, he didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just sat there, stunned, as the weight of justice crushed him at last. Darren was stripped his badge, sentenced to prison for abuse of power, conspiracy, and attempted witness intimidation. The cafe where it all began, it became a symbol. People gathered there to share stories of injustice, to remind each other that silence doesn't protect. It only feeds the abuser. And Angela, she walked back into that cafe weeks later, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The same barista who once trembled now smiled at her with pride. "On the house," she whispered, handing Angela a steaming cup of coffee. This time, Angela smiled back. Her dignity was no longer in question. Late one night, Marcus sat at his desk, looking at the closed case files. Justice had been served, but he knew the fight was far from over, because Darren wasn't the only one. There were more out there, more badges misused, more voices silenced, more mothers humiliated. And as long as he drew breath, Marcus Price wasn't going to stop fighting. He picked up the phone, calling his mother one last time. "Hey, Mom, you doing okay?" Angela's warm laugh filled the line. "I'm fine, baby. Better than fine. I'm proud." Marcus smiled. That was all he needed. "So I'll leave you with this. What would you do if you saw injustice? Look away or stand up? Because the truth is, Darren Cole isn't just a character in a story. He's a reflection of the abuse that happens every day, in every corner of the world. And just like Angela's son, it might take one person with courage to turn the tide. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Or was Darren just one piece of a much bigger problem? And that's where our story ends. One act of cruelty, one cup of coffee, that turned into a lesson the whole world could see. Angela's dignity, Marcus's courage, and the downfall of Officer Cole remind us of this simple truth. Injustice only wins when good people stay silent. So let's carry this story with us, not just as entertainment, but as a reminder that every voice matters, and every stand for justice ripples farther than we can imagine. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Backhand index pointing right hit that like button to push this message farther. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe justice was fully served? And if you want more stories where truth exposes darkness, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might just change the way you see the world. Until then, remember this. Power can silence a person, but truth can shake a system.